Welcome to the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast. I am here today with Joy Jarman-Walsh, also known as JJ Walsh in Japan. Hi, Joy. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Very early morning from here. It's great to join. Thanks, Brigitte.
Thank you for being here. She is a sustainably focused travel consultant, an educator, and a bespoke tour guide, and that is the capacity in which I first met her. I was lucky to connect with Joy in Hiroshima, where she took my family on a tour of the city on an awfully cold and rainy day, but she made the sunshine come into our hearts, especially as she was helping us find really awesome vegan food along the way. She is the host of the Seek Sustainable Japan talk show and podcast, which you can find on YouTube and elsewhere. She was not born in Japan. She was born in Hawaii. She studied psychology in California. And like many young Americans and Canadians, also went to Japan on the JET program at the beginning. She found her way to Hiroshima in 1996, and that is where she has been based ever since and where she raised her family. It is a really cool city to visit, by the way. I strongly recommend it. She studied sustainable tourism. She worked for some time as an assistant professor, but she found her true calling and passion guiding the world to develop more sustainable travel and tourism solutions. She also happens to be fully plant-based and avoids plastic as much as she can, which I have to say in Japan is no small feat. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and let's just get started. And welcome, Joy. It's such a pleasure to connect with you again today.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to talk to your audience. Hello, everyone out there.
Yeah, this is great. So tell me, because this is a vegan family kitchen after all, tell me about your food journey and what started you on this road to better eating.
I think as a kid, my parents would often say I was saying strange things. Like we would go to the beach and I'd be looking at all the nature and the shells and the fish and everything. And then I would say things like, oh, a fisherman had caught a fish. It's in the bucket. Oh, it's not beautiful anymore because it's not free. Like even as like a really little kid. And that really freaked my parents out. We had lots of pets growing up. So we had ducks and chickens and rabbits and things. And one day I came home and dinner was on the table, and my dad after dinner said, "Did that taste like chicken, or what did you think of that?" And I said, "Oh, it was okay." And he said, "There's rabbit." And oh, what rabbits? Whose rabbits? What are rabbits? And so it really made that connection for me that the animals we're eating is the animals that I love, that I'm taking care of. And I really tried as a 10-year-old to put my foot down and say, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And I was not allowed. That was not my parents' generation. They couldn't understand it. No, you have to eat meat to be healthy. All of those old sayings
Mm-hmm.
that we all grew up with, right? So once I went to university, I never really thought about it or had a philosophy, but I just stopped buying meat and fish. I never cooked it myself. If I was out, I didn't really think about it by ordering, but I would really get into salads. I started, finding beans instead of, or tofu instead of meat and things like that. So when I came to Japan and I met my now husband, and he was a vegetarian since he was 13. And I was like, what, you can do that? And so it, like putting together something that I think I was already gravitating to just because I felt that was the way I wanted to live, you know?
That is just so wonderful. And how did you go from being vegetarian to being practically vegan now?
So my son, when he was doing the IB program in high school, part of his studies was to do casts. And so we were doing different volunteer activities together, like doing beach cleanups. And he was analyzing where does the plastic come from and what is the flow of plastics and what happens to it from the moment it's made to what happens, but also looking at vegan vegetarian options. And he was the one that was like, I don't think it's too different from what we're doing now if we change to vegan cheese or we stop eating eggs. What do you think? And so I joined him, and so we're both vegan. And then the two others in our family, they still like having eggs, and so we're like a vegan vegetarian family. But I agreed with him that it wasn't such a difficult transition.
Hmm.
And I thought, yeah, why not? And because I usually am the one that makes the family meals, then the family becomes vegan. And then, like the base is vegan. And then, like my other family who's vegetarian, they might put some cheese on it. But now I've found really good vegan cheese. So now they're kind of slowly becoming comfortable with that. So it's all, yeah, taking things slow, not trying to push anybody into stuff they're not comfortable with. All the things that you often talk about too, I'm sure.
Let's talk for a moment about the offerings for vegan food in Japan. You mentioned I'm personally not a person who likes like vegan cheese very much and things like that, but I'm under the impression that those are probably not that easy to come by in Japan, and if they are now, it's probably a new thing. How's the
Yeah,
situation there?
it's last few years we've had more vegan options, but very come and go. Like you can't like rely on it always being there. But luckily we have a really good grocers in our local grocery store, and they have like a macrobiotic section at the top. I mean, this does not happen usually. So we're very lucky that the supermarket that's right next to us seems to have a more sustainable product focus, and they have decent vegan cheese and stuff. So it's, yeah, for me too. I don't really crave it. Like, like you don't get the same mouthfeel
Hmm.
as regular cheese, but when I do eat regular cheese, if I go back to it, I don't feel good anymore. Like it doesn't sit with me well. So definitely avoiding dairy has been a good thing for me.
Oh yes, dairy is my number one battle for me. Um, but I have to say though, I mean, other than obviously the fish, there's got to be a lot of traditionally vegan Japanese food. Like cheese was not a thing in Japan. I'm guessing until the
No.
40s or until the 50s or later.
Yeah.
So, what kind of traditionally vegan Japanese foods are there that you've come to embrace?
I mean, there's lots of tofu, of course. This is the land of tofu, which is lovely. But also, you can get lots of noodle. Like if you're thinking of cooking for the home, you want something quick but healthy. A lot of people will have ready-made noodles, buckwheat noodles or regular noodles, and adding salads. Everybody's going to the supermarket almost every day here. It's part of the habit, so buying the fresh vegetables every day, buying what you're going to use up, so less food waste, I think. I mean, although Japan does have big issues with food waste, like most of the world. But I love this habit of going and buying fresh veg every day. My daughter is super into salads, so she's got us all eating great big fresh salads every day. But one of the struggles, I think, if you're buying ready-made foods or pre-packaged foods, is almost everything has the katsuobushi, the fish stock in it. So if you're trying to get vegan foods that are already packaged or even from the deli, even side salads, like it looks fantastic. It's got tofu and spinach and beans in it. But if you read the label, yes, okay, fish stock in there. So if you're going to be flexible and just eat it anyway, which we often do out of convenience sake, just have it on top of rice, then you have to know that that's the standard. I think traditionally they would have used kombu dashi, the kelp uh, dashi, which is the stock. It'd be great to see that going back to it, but it's just become. I talked to a Shojin Yori chef in Kyoto, Bern Shellhorn, and he was saying Shojin Yori is the traditional Buddhist style vegan food. And he was doing it in Germany. He was doing it in Kyoto, like really
Wow.
high class cuisine for small bespoke groups only. But he was saying most Japanese food, it has that immediate hit from the katsuobushi, from that fish stock. And people are used to that strong flavor, and nobody's used to that light, subtle flavor. And so they don't appreciate the food as much unless it has a lot of salt or some like thicker
Right.
umami, right? So he always talks about you have to train your mouth to appreciate the lighter flavors, right? And I think that's true.
Totally. Yeah. I find that when we're used to, and it's the same with restaurant food versus home cooked food, right? It hits you with all the fireworks, so much oil, so much salt, so much added sugar, because they want to make it very palatable and appealing. And, you want to go back for it. So if you're always eating out, there's actually lots of studies that show that when people make food choices at home, they make healthier food choices. They don't care about health so much when eating out. And so at home, you're going to cook, in a slightly healthier way. You're not using so much, you're not going to put a tablespoon of salt in your food, but then you taste it and you're like, oh, it's a bit bland. And then you go back to the restaurant food. And I'm guessing it's the same with the fish component. It just creates those fireworks, and it's a habit. It's
Yeah.
habituation, right? And you need to train yourself out of it. But then next time you eat it, you get struck again about how
Yeah.
wonderful it might be or something. Though I have
Yeah.
to say, my husband, when he eats now very oily food from a restaurant, he finds it way too oily and he finds it really unpleasant. Like, we use very
Yeah.
little oil at home. Um, so
Yeah.
it's a habit that goes works both ways.
I did a detox yoga retreat for 10 days in Thailand, which was amazing. And I was
Ooh.
eating, I think they call it kitchen, which is like very basic, like beans and vegetables stew. That was all that I ate for a week. And then I had a few days to just eat bland foods after. But after eating just that, having lots of water, doing yoga every day, meditation. It was fabulous. And then even eating a cucumber had such amazing flavors.
Oh
Even a
yeah.
leaf of lettuce, which normally you would think had no flavor, it was amazing. And yeah, then you retrained your mouth to really appreciate natural, subtle flavors. And I think, yeah, I wish I could do that every year because I need that. I need that reminder that the
Yeah.
basic fresh stuff is the best, right?
Let's just book it and go. I'm with you. Let's do it next week. I'm ready. Tell me, Joy, about what you see, because you travel broadly within Japan. You've seen a lot going on. What are the challenges and the solutions in the country when it comes to eating healthy, living a sustainable life, trying to be better citizens of this little planet of ours?
Yeah. When I'm traveling around, I use Google and I search vegan near me or vegetarian, and quite often it's a miss. And then I'll ask people, ask friends, and try to get insider intel. Usually it's unexpected places. For some reason, they have a really good salad or a really good vegan option. I have a couple friends who are trying to put stuff online, so I always search what they're listing. um but yeah, it's not easy. And then sometimes when you find a great place and everything is so delicious and there's so much variety and everything's vegan, and you almost want to cry because you're like, thank you so much, I appreciate you guys, I know this is hard, keep going. But we have maybe four good places in Hiroshima. Before COVID we had more, and then
Oh,
during COVID, they said, oh, international visitors aren't coming anymore. So we're taking it off the menu. No, this is like 20 years of trying to work with people to get them to offer something. And
oh,
whenever I do consulting with destinations who want more international visitors, one of the basic things we always say is you should have at least 3 to 4 eateries that have one option, at least for vegan, vegetarian, if possible, one foundational dish which has a plant based protein, which is also gluten free. That's the foundation. And then you can add things like bread or, like add cheese or add fish or, like make that foundational dish. And that could be a great local produce that you're featuring. Like you don't even have to like market it as vegan if that's a problem. Like let's work on something. And it's such a mindset problem at the moment. Like people just can't comprehend. And maybe I'm sure you guys had this 10 or even 5 years ago in America or North America, like people just not feeling like it's a decent meal if it doesn't have meat or fish, right? So have this idea that we're featuring the local amazing vegetables and rice and a plant-based protein, but they're not thinking of plant-based protein as equal protein. That's one
Mhm.
of the big hurdles, right?
Right, the kind of basic nutrition. I did have the question with a guide that we met in Tokyo as we were looking for uh, as we were ending our tour with her. We said, "Oh, we're going to this vegan restaurant," and we started talking about what was veganism and everything. And she could not help herself. She said, "But where do you get your protein?" And I had to laugh. She could just not believe even that it was possible.
Yeah.
So clearly. It's not on the radar, but I really appreciate that you're putting it on for many people because it is true. I mean, every vegan restaurant that I've been to in Japan had long lines, usually of foreign customers, not just foreign customers, but clearly it's drawing the international crowds. So I hope they
Yeah.
keep on doing it more.
Yeah, and most of the meat that you would eat in Japan is imported. So you're having a huge carbon hit every time you eat anything, even fish. Fishing industry in Japan is they're really overfishing. There's a lot of fish farms. There's a lot of pollution related. So even thinking of the environmental aspect of the food you're eating. There's more and more people trying to promote wild meats, right? Like the wild boar, the deer, because they're a pest. There's too many of them. If you're going to eat meat, I would say go for the wild meats. It's probably healthier for you and more sustainable as well. So,
Tell me a little
yeah,
bit about
tricky.
some because you mentioned having the foundation and then maybe adding things on top. An experience that we had in Japan was that and the language barrier was certainly an issue for us, but we thought it was quite challenging to try to change whatever was on the menu, and even if it just meant removing things, it seemed to be a hurdle that the servers could not get over. Has it also been your experience, and how
Oh,
can foreigners
huge,
deal with
huge
this?
difficulty for many years. And I think this goes back to the idea that Japan respects artisans. They respect chefs and craftspeople so much. So to ask the chef who has this great dish to change it or to take something out is like a real a slap in the face of respect, right? So I think that might be the root of it, but flexibility is not easy in Japan. It's really hard. It's a huge challenge. And yeah, we always try to work with chefs, and the best success stories are always the owner works really closely with the chef. The owner has the vision, the chef
Right.
slowly comes on to the vision, and then they get the positive response from the customer, and it reinforces that positive behavior. It's all very psychology, right?
Yes, I did
But we had this
feel,
great
yeah.
experience with a fugu restaurant, which is blowfish in
Ooh,
the Seto Uchi area. And the owner, she just was like, we have to have one good vegan set. And she's like, it has to be equal to the fugu set that we're giving, because this is
right.
for the VIPs, this is for the high end market. And she did such a beautiful job working with the chef to make dish by dish comparisons. So you have the jellyfish for the meat, the fish eaters. You have the clear konnyaku jelly for the vegans. Like it was taste, look, everything was
Yes.
so comparable. And I was so impressed with her. And I was like, man, we should really promote you guys. Like what you're doing is amazing. But she said it's like 10 years of working on the chef. And she's like, if the chef changes, I'd be out of luck, like I've had to work on this guy for 10 years.
Oh gosh, yes, I've definitely felt in, especially talking to a server in the restaurant, that the perhaps the social hierarchy was such that the server could not go to the chef and say, you know, the customer doesn't want your beautiful meat sauce or whatnot, right? It's the social dynamics that I think we need to be aware of when we're stepping into the Japanese culture and not just going to stomp all over it, which doesn't mean that we're going to eat meat. But as you were mentioning, there's lots of other resources to find where the already vegan options are, and it might be a better choice for now to support those
Yeah.
in many
And
cases.
it's not just Japanese people being inflexible. Sometimes the visitor is also really challenging. Like I've been guiding a lot. Today's my 80th tour since I started last year. I was training guides for many years and saying these things like you have to be flexible and stuff. Now I'm having to do it myself, so it's good to walk the talk for sure. But I had a guest a couple days ago. She didn't want any carbs. She didn't want any meat, and she wouldn't eat rice even. And I'm like, what the heck? And so I was like, well, there's this roasted sweet potato and chestnut place. Like that's usually my go-to standard. Everybody can eat it, gluten-free, vegan, everybody, right? She's like, oh, I don't really like sweet potato. So you're adding pickiness to like this. Oh, okay. Oh my God. Like we ended up at a convenience store. She got a packet of daikon salad, mixed salad, and then a slab of tofu. And eventually that was okay for her. But man, I was like, dude, give me some warning, like
Yes,
if you have these concerns, that's fine. Just give your guide like a week's notice so they can do some research.
for sure. I think there's a much greater variety of nutritional preferences that did not exist maybe some years ago. So, and I can imagine the sweet potatoes have carbs too, so that's out. But yeah,
Oh, is
tofu by
that
the
why?
spoon, nothing wrong with that. I love that. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to eat with just a sprinkle of salt. Delicious.
Yep. No.
Let's talk about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So for me, you mentioned like before we started, for me, it's also a challenge trying to live more sustainably, like finding vegan options, but also trying to find things that are not wholly plastic. In so much plastic pollution every time you buy something, and that's a real challenge as well. So sometimes finding things in Costco because it's bulk, and then
Right.
I have less packaging waste. I know that Costco has a good supply chain. There's so much food waste for supermarkets, but a lot of it is connected to all that excess plastic packaging. As a guide, always suggesting to guests and asking for it myself, can I have that like from the bakery? Can I have that without the plastic packaging? Even in the supermarket, people wrapping everything in other plastic bags, even though plastic is supposed to be banned or you're supposed to have to pay for a plastic bag, but everything has these free plastic. It's just a nightmare. And then everyone carrying the plastic pet bottles around. There's nowhere to refill your bottles, right? Like there's so many challenges right now. And I think on many of these sustainability things, which is definitely connected to the vegan trends as well, we are a good 10 years behind where you guys are in just normal everyday understanding of these issues and the reason to reduce plastic. Like I get this all the time. Why should we reduce plastic? Like why?
Oh,
Yeah, it's just
okay.
the basic understanding is just not there. Like the newspapers aren't talking about it, the media is not commenting on it. I always ask for refill stations for my water bottle, and people in the information center are sending me to the toilet to refill, and I'm like, no thank you, not gonna happen. Or go buy a bottle. No, there is no garbage can either. Come on guys, let's work it out,
Throw me a bone,
so yeah.
Wow. Well, I have to say though, and definitely I did find the single use, objects, everything, toothbrushes, pajamas, everything single use in Japan to be a little bit jarring in a way because as you say, there's been more awareness about those issues in America and North America and Europe certainly. But at the same time, I'm hoping that the Japanese society doesn't beat itself down because, in terms of energy use and in terms of urban, the environmental footprint of the average Japanese person, because they use public transport more and they use less energy, heating. Here we're heating those massive mansions, and there we had this lovely traditional Japanese ryokan, a traditional Japanese accommodation where it was quite cold in the room, but we had a heated pad under the table that we were sitting on, and then it was cozy and it was perfectly fine, right? But here we feel the need to. So I guess we've got different priorities when it comes to environmental behaviors. But it seems to me like it would make, once they get it, I feel like it could go kind of fast to
Yeah,
disrupt that single use and over packaging chain.
I
Do you
I
think,
agree,
do you
100%.
see
Yeah,
glimmers of hope? Are there people
yeah.
that are doing work in the right direction right now? Have you encountered them on your podcast or somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Most, like over 480 interviews since 2020. So many people who are doing great things. And I think for me, psychologically, it's really empowering because I feel like this is my community. Like we are like kindred spirits, like we are all around Japan. We are all fighting the good fight kind of thing. And so many of these people, I think I've adopted a lot of the sense from them that you just do what you can do. Like, don't beat yourself up too much. You can't buy that healthy food that you want to eat without plastic packaging. You're just going to have to buy it for now and keep looking for options later, that kind of thing.
Right.
Jack Bales of Alishan Tengu has been a huge resource. It was wonderful to be able to talk to him. When I first came to Japan as a jet looking for vegetarian options, he had an online store in Tokyo. Now he's got a cafe as well. So he's really like one of the life saviors for anyone looking vegetarian, vegan in Japan. Kana Watanda and the I Now Kamikatsu, the zero waste town, they're trying so hard to reuse and recycle or compost everything. It's the only town in Japan 100% composting, and it's all to do with
Wow.
lack of money. They don't have money for landfill. They don't have money for garbage collection. So it like comes from just the need to do something with your garbage, and they've become amazing. 80% of their garbage diverted from landfill or incinerators.
Wow.
Nowhere in Japan is doing that. So it's
Where is that town?
wonderful.
Where is it?
It's Kamikatsu. It's a small town in Tokushima on Shikoku Island, and
Wow.
they are starting to do some tourism. This INOW group, they do like farm stays or go and see what the garbage separation is like. So it's become like a tourism draw as well,
Yes,
which
it
is
should
wonderful
be.
to
Yeah.
see. Yeah, and they've got a fantastic brewery there, Rise and Win, and the brewery. Whenever I visit, they're trying to separate out all their waste, give it to farmers, filter all the water before it goes back in the river. Like there's just they get it, like they see this beautiful, pristine village. How can we keep it beautiful and sustainable? And that's attracting new residents, which is a big deal in Japan because we're having depopulation, we're having so many empty abandoned houses. So wonderful, wonderful to see. In my area now, Fukuoka and her husband, she was a peace activist going all over the world talking about peace and Hiroshima, and then now her and her husband live in a rural area and they're doing organic farming and not only selling their produce online but doing lots of education and workshops and bringing people to the farm and showing them how it works and how you can have plant-based proteins and stuff like that. um, Noriko Shindo is in Tokyo. She just started a new app called Hue, but for a long time she was a vegan ethical community advocate, trying to set up ways for people looking for more sustainable options can connect and find that information. There is Happy Cow, there is
Hmm.
Google, there are books written on vegan guides around Japan, but having like a more dynamic online, always updated format is definitely something that would really change the game, I think. Yeah.
Is there not a Google Map with all the vegan options in Japan? Somebody
There
creating
is,
a.
it comes and goes. I've been a Google Guide for many years. I went to the Google Guide conference in 2019 in California and everything. I'm always updating, but every now and again it gets hijacked.
Oh,
You have like a nice vegan list of places, and then somebody will put like all these yakiniku places and, like
oh,
McDonald's and stuff. And you're like,
oh, that's so
really?
much
It's hard
work.
enough, dudes.
So much work,
But yeah, the people in my
fighting the
show,
trolls.
they give me so much good ideas, but also a lot of things I hadn't been thinking about, or a lot of ways to look at issues from different perspectives. So yeah, and of course, Brigitte, you gave wonderful perspectives as well. Thank you for joining the show. But even from the outside, and then your travels in Japan and your experience, that was wonderful to hear about.
I wouldn't have expected. I have to say, one of my surprises was because having traveled in Vietnam a little bit, you could always count on the Buddhists to have vegan food. And I found that to be somewhat, but I think it was me, less accessible when I was in Japan. Maybe because Japanese people are less committed to Buddhism than
I
I would have
don't know.
expected them.
They
They're
just
more,
don't. Yeah, you know what I think really changed it is when they started doing pilgrimage. Kukai, who was one of the most important Buddhist monks to come and bring Buddhism to the common people in the year 500 in Japan, he created lots of pilgrimages around Japan. And part of the pilgrimage was to ask for donations of money or food. And when they were given fish or meat as a donation of food, it would be worse to refuse the gift
right,
because you're supposed to come from a humble place. And I really think that was the start of the change in diet for a lot of people that maybe were living vegan day to day. And the idea that to not accept food from someone donating, but also from a chef who wants to make it that way, like you don't question it, you want to be humble, you want to be respectful. And I really do
right,
think that might be the root of a lot of the hurdles for vegan vegetarian in Japan right now. People just aren't thinking of it as a necessity, right? Like the plastic
right,
thing. Why should we reduce meat? Nobody knows about the issues of all the meat being imported, of all the problems with the fishing industry. There's a perception that Japan is better than other countries. Not a lot of people are traveling right now because of the
right.
low yen, so they're not seeing other perspectives. Hawaii 10 years ago banned plastic bags, and I remember students that I took over there and visitors from Japan who came back and talked to me about Hawaii, they would always say, "Oh my gosh, there's no plastic bags there. Isn't that wonderful?" So without traveling, they're not seeing it. But now,
Right,
luckily, at least the international traveler, if they're having engagement with them, are expecting more sustainable standards, are
right,
expecting and asking for vegan options. So the pressure, the soft positive pressure is coming in, luckily. But people aren't going out and seeing how other countries are different
right.
from Japan right now.
Let's talk about our own domestic tourism. How can we be supportive of more sustainable tourism travel in our own cities? I'd like to be a tourist in my own city of Vancouver, but I'd like to hear you on that. What can we do when we're at home?
I think one of the basic standards is carry your own bottle everywhere, fill up with water all the time, ask at places, can you fill up? That's just such a standard basic thing. When you find oh, you guys probably have so many amazing options for like zero waste shops where you can fill up with your own container. I was reading about Europe and Seattle, and they're on the Guardian in the UK. They had a big article about how they're trying to, even for takeout containers, make a standard for reusable containers, and how difficult it is, how challenging it is. But if you have a standard container size and shape, and you can drop it off anywhere and pick it up anywhere, that's something Vancouver I could see doing, and they're really exciting. That's a bit ways off in Japan, although I always suggest it, and then people are like looking at me like I'm an alien from outer space. Like, what are you talking about? That's insane. But when people get the idea that you could have this beautiful bento box at all stations across Japan for the station bento that everybody wants to,
Yes,
and you could drop it off at any train station, reuse it, and keep it circular. Like, stop creating all this unnecessary waste. But anyway, it's a conversation that needs a little bit more time, I think.
it
But yeah,
seems
bring
that,
your own,
yeah, if
keep
anybody
your
can
own
do it, it has to
container
be the
until
Japanese.
then.
You
Sorry?
know, if anybody can do
Yeah.
it, it should be the Japanese, because you were just mentioning the trains, and I was, thinking back on those bento boxes that everybody has before they get on. There's so many things that are already standardized. It
Yes.
seems that that should be
And
an
so
easy
many
candidate.
traditional Japanese things that people are proud of, like using furoshiki wrapping, and you're using high quality bento boxes when you're going to school or when you're going to the office. Most people already do that. So the idea that the bento shop is going to give you a reusable container with their logoed furoshiki or something, or your furoshiki, your wrapping that you can reuse over and over again. I think once people, I think you're right, Brigitte. Once people get the idea, it's going to click, and people are going to appreciate the value of it, not just reducing waste, not just, more convenient, but the value of using a nicer box, not
Yeah.
creating a pile of waste when you eat everything, right?
We can keep on hoping and working in the right direction, as you say, taking those little steps that are within our reach, and then it creates the possibility of creating yet another little step closer to our goals. And just like that, we might travel a long way. It was such a pleasure to chat with you again today. And I want to make sure that people that are going to Hiroshima can get a hold of you, or if anyone watching this has connections in the Japanese tourism industry and they want to bring you in to help develop more sustainable options, how can people get a hold of you?
You can search JJ Walsh Japan. That's what I usually go by online, or my business is called Inbound Ambassador. I have a really exciting project coming up with 10 different locations around Japan. I'll be doing online consulting with them. That's over the next couple months. So I do have, consulting work at least once a month where I have the chance to talk to people in the management side, but also, and I think this is something all your listeners can do as well. When you hear of something good, and if you're on social media, to highlight what's happening good in your area and to share that information, but also to write a comment of support and to say support for businesses that you appreciate,
Yes.
that they are doing the right thing. That's definitely something we can all do. And I think it makes the business owner who is trying to do the right thing, it positively reinforces what they're trying to do and keeps them going, because everybody's operating on such tight margins.
Yes.
That little bit of positive enthusiasm for what they do can go a long way.
I love the reminder. I will put all the links to connect with you in the show notes. And thank you again for making time for the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast today, Joy. It was a great pleasure to connect with you again. And I look forward to you visiting Vancouver so we can taste all the vegan food. And perhaps even we do have a reusable takeout container program. So we can try that together and see
Yes.
how it goes.
Awesome. I can't wait. Thank you so much.